Cameras caught Jude Bellingham covering his mouth while speaking to Ghana's Jordan Ayew during England's draw with Ghana. The same gesture, the same hand, the same rule that ended Miguel Almirón's World Cup earlier this tournament. Almirón got a red card, Bellingham got nothing. And that is only the first half of what happened in Boston on Tuesday, because before that conversation with Ayew even became the story, Bellingham had already made a reckless tackle, stormed toward Ghana's entire technical bench at halftime, and reportedly used a word that Ghana's manager described as not in the book of life. FIFA's new rule stayed in its pocket for all of it. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why Ghana are furious, why Paraguay have filed a formal protest, and why the rule FIFA introduced to protect players is now the most inconsistently applied regulation in the tournament. We covered the Almirón story on this channel when it first broke, linked on screen, but here's the recap that matters for today. Paraguay's Miguel Almirón became the first player sent off at this World Cup for covering his mouth while speaking to an opponent. It happened during a physical confrontation between players from both sides. Almirón was not directly involved in the altercation. He covered his mouth while speaking to Turkey's Mert Muldur. Muldur immediately appealed to the referee, and after a VAR review, Almirón was shown red and suspended for Paraguay's next match. The rule itself is new, introduced specifically for this tournament after an incident involving Benfica's Gianluca Prestiani, who was caught hiding alleged homophobic abuse directed at Real Madrid's Vinicius Jr. FIFA's intent was to stop abuse from hiding behind a hand. The implementation, as Tuesday night confirmed, is a different conversation entirely. Here is exactly what happened in Boston. England were playing Ghana in a tense group stage match that ended 0-0. In the build-up to halftime, Bellingham made a challenge on Ghana defender Jerome Opoku, a tackle Ghana immediately contested as reckless. As the players moved into the tunnel at halftime, Bellingham approached Ghana's technical bench. Footage shows him clashing fiercely with Ghana assistant coach John Paintseal. Both sides reportedly shouted insults at each other as tensions escalated. Bellingham had to be physically pulled away by England teammate Morgan Rogers. Ghana manager Carlos Queiroz later said Bellingham used one word that is not in the book of life during the confrontation. Tuchel's response: "It was an exchange of emotions, and Jude stood up for himself and his team. No card, no VAR review. No sanction of any kind for approaching the opposing bench and reportedly swearing at their staff." And then, separate from all of that, cameras caught Bellingham covering his mouth while speaking to Jordan Ayew. The same gesture Almirón made, the gesture FIFA built a rule around, the gesture that, when Almirón did it, triggered an immediate appeal from the opposition, a VAR review, and a red card. This time, VAR stayed silent. FIFA's explanation for why Bellingham was not punished comes through the words of Pierluigi Collina, FIFA's head of referees, who clarified before the tournament that the rule applies only when mouth covering occurs during a confrontational exchange. If the conversation is friendly, they can continue to do it without any problem. When the conversation is confrontational, covering the mouth means that you are doing something very wrong potentially, and that is when the sanction applies. So there it is. FIFA's defense is context. The Bellingham-Ayew exchange, they say, did not appear confrontational. Ayew did not appeal to the referee. Nothing escalated between the two players specifically. And because the rule requires a referee to make a judgment call about what qualifies as confrontational, and because no one flagged the Bellingham-Ayew exchange the way Muldur flagged the Almirón one, the rule simply did not fire. Now sit with that for a moment. A player who had just made a reckless tackle stormed toward the opposing bench, reportedly used a word not in the book of life, and had to be physically separated from opposition staff. That player was simultaneously having a friendly conversation with a Ghana forward while covering his mouth. That is the argument FIFA is making, that in the middle of the most heated passage of the entire match, the specific moment Bellingham covered his mouth and spoke to Ayew was actually fine, friendly even. The rule, in practice, now depends entirely on whether the opposition appeals. Muldur appealed. Ayew did not. Almiron is gone. Bellingham plays on. That is not a rule. That is a lottery. Paraguay's federation filed a formal protest with FIFA in direct response to the Bellingham incident, pointing to the inconsistency between Almiron's red card and Bellingham's non-sanction. They are not wrong to ask the question. Their captain missed a World Cup match for doing in a less heated overall environment, something that a player from one of football's wealthiest and most commercially significant nations did during a confrontation that involved the opposing manager, the opposing bench staff, and words Ghana's own coach publicly said were inappropriate, and faced no consequence whatsoever. Ghana had a second grievance on top of that. Queiroz also questioned whether VAR was functioning after his side were denied what he considered a clear penalty. "I'm not sure VAR is still working in the World Cup," he said. "They're very lucky. Once again, VAR went for a coffee. One game, two separate officiating controversies, both going against Ghana, both unresolved." The question this story raises is bigger than one match. If the Vinny rule relies on referee judgment to determine what is confrontational, and if that judgment produces wildly different outcomes in different matches for different players, then the rule is not actually a rule, it is a feeling. And feelings, as Paraguay and Ghana have now both discovered in different ways in the same tournament, tend to fall differently depending on who is involved and how quickly the opposition reacts. FIFA introduced this rule to protect players from hidden abuse. That is a genuinely good intention, but a rule that can only be triggered if an opponent immediately appeals. And that depends on a referee deciding in real time whether a conversation felt friendly, is a rule that powerful, well-connected nations will always navigate more easily than smaller ones. Paraguay lost their captain to it. Ghana watched a player reportedly swear at their bench cover his mouth with no consequence. And FIFA has still not explained, in terms anyone outside the rulebook can follow, what the actual difference was. Almirón was sent off. Bellingham walked free. Ghana were furious. Paraguay filed a protest. And FIFA is asking everyone to trust that this rule is being applied consistently. Do you think Bellingham should have been sent off? And do you think FIFA is applying this rule fairly? Comment below, because the gap between what happened to Almirón and what happened to Bellingham on Tuesday night is impossible to explain without picking a side. Subscribe to follow how FIFA responds to Paraguay's formal protest, because that answer, when it comes, will tell you everything about how this rule is really being run.